Okay, guys, your nerdy teacher could not be more excited that we are doing a unit on algebra. You're gonna love it. It's really awesome. I can't wait. So we're doing algebra, we're doing some patterns, and we're doing coordinate graphs, which I also think are the coolest. I'm pretty stoked. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. This should be the last lesson that you've done this week because your first two lessons were about wrapping up Unit 6, and then the last thing that you did before this lesson is actually you took your Unit 6 test. So if you haven't taken your Unit 6 test today, you need to watch this video another day. But for now, we're just going to talk about some expressions. So if you'll remember, an expression is actually something that does not have an equal sign. So for example, 2 plus 2 equals 4 is an example of what we call an equation, but an expression is when they just are telling you something like 2 plus 2. So here are some examples here. 1/2 plus 2/3. It doesn't have an equal sign, so we just call it an expression. These also help us as we start to think about variables. So here, like when we had 1/2 plus 2/3, if we didn't know that 2/3, you could have said 1/2 plus a, and then you're trying to find this unknown that you're talking about. So expressions are used a lot in algebra when you are using variables which sort of express your unknown number. Okay, so then that's kind of what I just said right here. It says expressions use numbers and symbols to express computations. So for example, in this expression, 3.5 plus 6.3, the way you would say that in words is you could say you're adding 3.5 and 6.3. Another thing you could say is like the sum of 3.5 and 6.3. Okay, so then if you saw something like 10 minus 2, the way we would say that in words is subtract 2 from 10, or you could even just say 10 minus 2. That totally works. Half times p, multiply p by 1/2, or you could even say the product of half and p, something like that would work. And then 14 divided by 4, divide 14 by 4, or you could even say the quotient of 14 and 4, something along those lines, okay? So if you look at number 1, it says there's more than one way to say some of the computations above. For example, for 3.5 plus 6.3, you could also say find the sum of 3.5 and 6.3. I probably should have read that first before I gave you that example. But for number 1, it says what is another way to say 1/2 times p? And we're going to write down the one I said right here. You can say the product of 1/2 and p. If you'll remember, product is one of those math vocabulary words that means the answer to a multiplication problem, which is why that will work here. Okay, that's good for you guys to know also. You're probably going to hear me say words like sum, product, difference, and quotient. And these all tell you that you're doing some sort of operation. Sum is plus, product is multiplication, difference is subtraction, and quotient is division. So those are things you're just going to have to know, okay? But let's look at the next part. It wants you to write the computation in words, and there's more than one way that you can write these, but we'll just kind of take it easy today. This first one would be subtract, and yes, you need to write these with me. Subtract, we'll say 2.25 from 7.5. Another thing you could have said is just the difference between 7.5 and 2.25. Something like that would work. Next one you could say find the sum of b and 9. The next one's product. So, but we're going to make it easy. We're just going to say multiply 3/4, 8, and 1/2. Easy enough. And then on the last one, we could just say divide 1.6 by 0.2. Okay, So for the next part, they're actually having you do the opposite. They're having you write an expression from words. And sometimes these are tricky. I'm actually going to have you go back and look at this one right here. Do you see here how we said subtract 2.25? But that's actually the second number that's in here. So it's not always straightforward. It doesn't always mean the first number you come across is the first problem or the first number that you write. Because if we had written this, that would be a totally different answer than what we intended. So number 6 is that's not a big deal, but this one says find the product of 12 and 0.1. Well, that just means 12 times 0.1. So we'd write it like that. You'll notice it doesn't even want you to find the answer. It just wants you to write the expression. I'm going to remind you here, we got to be careful with this x when we're talking about multiplication with variables, because x is technically a variable. So you might want to try to get into the habit of writing these with that dot. That dot is another good indicator of when you're supposed to multiply. Okay? Now number 7 we got to be careful with. Subtract 2/3 from 3.5. So that means actually that my 3.5 comes first, and then I'm going to subtract 2/3. Number 8 is addition, and it doesn't matter the order that you add things. So it can either be 14 plus t, or it could be t plus 14, doesn't matter which one. And then number 9 says divide P by Q. So that means you're going to take P and you're dividing it by Q. All right. So let's look over here on the next page. And this is talking to you about order of operations. I talked to you briefly about this the other day. But basically what the order of operations, what they just told you right here is that PEMDAS that we had talked about. PEMDAS is one of those things that I remember from when I was a kid. We always learned, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Maybe she farted at the table or something, who knows. But you are going to please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, okay? It's just a way to help you remember parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. But just to make things a little bit more confusing, this basically is all done first from left to right. This is done second from left to right, and this is done third from left to right. And what I mean by that is, let's say that in a problem it told you to do 2 plus, 9 minus 6. You are just working from left to right. Actually, that's a terrible example because addition comes first. Let's say instead that you had something like 9 minus 2 plus 7. Let's say that, okay? Well, just because the addition part is second, it doesn't actually matter because all you have left is addition and subtraction, so you're just doing any order of that from the left side of the problem to the right side of the problem. You'll get the hang of that as we go. So now I'm going to actually erase all of this because I got a little pen happy over there, and that's too distracting. So let me get rid of some of that. Okay. So what this is probably showing you right now, what this is showing you right now is those steps that I was talking about. First, you're going to perform all the operations inside parentheses. That E is the other letter there in PEMDAS, but we don't have any exponents right now, so you don't have to worry about it. So that parentheses is the first thing we're going to worry about. Then it says to multiply and divide from left to right. So again, it doesn't matter what order, you just do multiplication and division. And then your third time through the problem, you're going to add and subtract. So these problems end up starting to look like a pyramid. You're going to start with a much longer equation, then you're going to get rid of part of it and it'll get a little smaller until eventually you just have one final answer. Okay? So back to the directions. When you read and write expressions with more than one operation, you think about the order of operations. So for instance, in this problem right here, it says 11 times 15 plus 3. And you have to think about your order of operations. What comes first? Am I going to multiply first or am I going to add first? Well, on this one, I would have obviously needed to multiply first. So I would have done this 11 times 15, and then whatever that answer was, I would have added 3. But look at this one with parentheses. In this one, I would have had to add 15 and 3 first because that's my step 1. It says I'm supposed to solve anything that has parentheses. So I would have done 15 plus 3, which is 18, and then multiplied that by 11. Okay, so let's look at number 10. It says consider the expression 12 divided by 5 plus 2. So it says which operation is done first here? Do we divide or do we add? Well, because this is in parentheses, we are actually going to add first. Now that's not, excuse me, hiccups, that's not normally the case, but because of those parentheses, we're going to add the first. Then it says to write the computation in words. So we don't actually have to solve this, but we are going to say we want to divide 12 by the sum of 5 and 2. I want you to take a minute to write that down. You divide 12 by the sum of 5 and 2, because that shows me my order of operations. It tells me I'm going to divide 12, but I'm going to divide it by whatever these two are added together. But now let's look at the same exact problem minus those parentheses. So in this problem, we've got division first and then addition, but that doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is it tells us to multiply and divide first. So what am I going to do first on this one? I'm going to divide first. And this time my words are going to be a little bit different. This time I'm going to do divide 12 by 5 and add 2. Do you see how different that is? It's going to come up with two totally different answers. Okay, let's look at number 12. This one wants you to write the computation in words, but to think about the order of operations. So for examples, parentheses first, then you're going to multiply and divide, then you're going to add and subtract. Okay, so it says 3.5 minus 2.1 plus 1.2. Again, we're not actually solving, we're just writing this in words. So we're going to subtract the sum of 2.1 and 1.2 from 3.5. So we know we're doing subtraction, but not until we figure out what these two are added together. I'll give you a second to write that down. Again, it's subtract the sum of 2.1 and 1.2 from 3.5. Okay, so on number 13, it says 1/2 plus 3/4 times t. Well, this one doesn't have parentheses, so instead we need to use our knowledge of order of operations, and the first thing I see is addition, but the next one is multiplication, and my order of operations tells me that I need to multiply and divide before I add and subtract. So I'm actually going to add, I'm eventually going to add half, but I can say here I'm going to find the product of 3/4 and t, then add 1/2. Find the product of 3/4 and t, then add 1/2. Okay. Number 14, I'm just going to say out loud because I'm getting really close on my time. I got to get this in 15 minutes. So this one was 25 minus 10 divided by 5. Since these are in parentheses, you're going to do that first. So you would say, basically, the answer to, or the difference between 25 and 10 divided by 5. So you're going to find that difference first, and then you're going to divide it by 5. Okay? So let's look at these ones. It wants us to write an expression for the words. I'm going to go rapid fire. Holy cow, I'm almost out of time. Okay, multiply the sum of p and 3 by 0.1. That would have been p plus 3 times 0.1. You also could have done 0.1 times, just do that one. Okay, then I've got 36 divided by 4. Plus 3. Order of operations tells me I don't even need a parentheses on that one. I'm good, but you could have done that first if you wanted to. Add the product of 2 and 5 to the product of 9 and 8. So I need to do 2 times 5 plus 9 times 8. And those definitely need to be in parentheses. Okay, showing you this final screen. I've got just a second. You are finishing up. Actually, we did them all together. You should go do the homework and remembering pages, or you should go do some IXL lessons. Either one is fine with me. Sorry I had to rush through the end. And as always, log into Zoom if you guys need any help, okay? Good luck.